Blurry. I'm joined this morning by Phil Stewart, a Reuters reporter. Good morning.
Morning.
So with the arrival of the USS Ford, there are thought to be roughly 15,000 American personnel in the region. What is the U.S. hoping to gain with this show of force?
That's a really great question. I think a lot of folks like myself who are watching the U.S. military very closely are really unsure. You know, the official justification here is about the war on drugs, kind of revisited in this new administration. But a lot of this seems very much aimed at Venezuela and its president, Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, it's a lot of military power to focus on smugglers and cartels, as the U.S. says. How is the U.S. justifying this show of force for drug smugglers?
Well, I think what you're seeing right now is a real blurring of the lines between the war on drugs and real U.S. concern that goes back, several administrations about President Nicolas Maduro. Now, the U.S. government has linked Maduro to drug trafficking, and the question is this campaign against drugs eventually going to escalate into something resembling regime change or military action, including strikes inside Venezuela or something else?
Getting back to Rubio's comments that he made yesterday here in Canada, that messaging seemed to be not as much for the European press as it is for the American public who might be listening for that answer. Is he breaking, or not him, is the U.S. breaking international law?
Well, that's a really good question. Right now, the United States says no. They're not breaking international law because just like with the war on terrorism, these folks are declared terrorists, and therefore they're legitimate military targets. Now, a lot of people would disagree with that and say that there's no way you can compare an Al Qaeda terrorist to a drug smuggler. And in the United States, drug smuggling is not a capital offense in anywhere. And so the question about the legality of the strikes is very much alive in Congress, where Democrats are saying these are illegal, and in the national community, where there's a lot of growing anxiety and concern about these strikes, especially given the lack of information that the public has about the identities of those who are being killed.
Mm-hmm. The U.S. and the Venezuelan regime have been at odds for decades, first under former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and currently with President Nicolas Maduro. So why this escalation now?
Well, we're not really sure, why the timing has gotten us to this moment where we have now, the world's most advanced, largest aircraft carrier in the Caribbean, along with, well over half a dozen warships, including guided missile destroyers and even a nuclear submarine armed with, Lord knows what. So, we're in a situation right now of intense escalation without a real clear crisis point. So we don't know whether this will continue for a while, whether we're getting towards a tipping point. And I think that this summer's surprise operation against Iran has kept a lot of us really on the edge of our seats, because we weren't anticipating, the U.S. strike at that moment on Iran's nuclear facilities. And yet it went ahead after, many, many years of folks talking about maybe possibly one day doing it. So I think a lot of us are just sort of wondering exactly that same question. Why now? Where are we? Where are we going?
On the other side of this confrontation, Venezuela says it is launching a massive mobilization, that's their description, of military personnel in response to the buildup of U.S. warships and troops. So is Venezuela equipped to fend off any American military advances, and what is the potential for further escalation?
So that is a great question. I think that if you look at Venezuela's military, frankly, they're just no match for the U.S. military in a head-on-head confrontation. I mean, they have some fighter jets that were purchased from the United States in the 1980s. They have some and they have some Chinese and Russian equipment. But really, they wouldn't really be a match. So what you're probably going to see if there were a U.S. confrontation directly with Venezuela is that Venezuela would move toward a more guerrilla-style, response, which is what Reuters reporting this past week. My news agency has reported, which is that Venezuela is preparing for an unconventional response, because that's really the only choice they have.
Phil Stewart, a reporter with Reuters. Thanks for coming on this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.